Welcome. We're back with another episode of Coffee with April. This time, we're going to introduce our subscription coffee for January, the 1st of 2020. So we have a lot of interesting movement and change in our green coffee here at April. One of the things that we're working hard on is to actually separate the coffees we work with into two parts, meaning that the coffee that is harvested late in the year and early in the new year, meaning December 2018 to early 2019, we basically want to stop using now and want to move on to coffee that is harvested later in the year, which in this case means late summer, early autumn in 2019. And the coffee that we chose for this month is a good example of that. It's our first coffee from Rwanda. This specific coffee is a classic washed red Bourbon, which is the most common varietal by far. This comes down to politics in Rwanda. We're going to start seeing a few of the varietals popping up, and we're happy to be able to introduce some of them later on, but that will be a discussion for another video. This specific coffee is produced by a gentleman called Emmanuel. He's been farming coffee for quite some time now. He owns 4 different processing stations in Rwanda, and it's producing some really good coffee. And one of the main things for us has been seasonality, has been traceability when it comes to a lot of African countries that we buy from, because that's the hardest part. The majority of that becomes or is because of cooperatives, right? Cooperatives makes it harder for us to understand where does my coffee actually comes from. Now, when talking to Emmanuel, we actually had a Skype call not too long ago, and it's really interesting because through him, we're able to get really good transparency in terms of where does this coffee actually come from. They track who's picked it, they track where is it dried, they track when is it processed. So every single step we have basically documentations on. So we can track this on to a specific group of farmers, specific group of lands that we actually can meet, talk with, have a discussion with, and make sure long-term this coffee gets better. Specifically, this coffee comes from an area that is basically right on Lake Kivu, called Rutsiro. Probably butchering that pronouncement, but that's the best that I can do at least. Very classic Rwandan coffee. We have a bunch of tropical fruits in it. We have a lot of herbal qualities, which some people like, some people don't. We're kind of growing to like it here at April. A lot of red berry qualities as well. I think for us, the most important thing is we want to work with seasonality, and we want to show the diversity that comes with coffee. And my argument is going to be that a fresh crop, really tasty Rwandan coffee, for example, is going to outperform most Kenyan coffees that are now then technically 1 year old, right? So we want to basically make sure you guys always have fresh coffee. When I say fresh coffee, I refer to the green coffee and when it was harvested. So furthermore, as with most Rwandan coffees, most coffees that we work with is a washed processed coffee. In this case, it's pretty simple. It's basically fully depulped, soaked in water for more or less a day, and then just dried directly on tables, more or less. And that drying is between 12 to 16 days, a bit depending on weather, depending on where you are, right? So pretty straightforward. We do see a lot of natural processed coffees coming out of Rwanda. We do see a lot of honey process. We see anaerobic processes. Trust me when I say you're not going to find those at April anytime soon. And if anyone wonders why that's the case, then send us an email and we'll explain that to you. Now, as usual, we're going to walk you through how are we roasting this coffee, how are we brewing this coffee. So initially, roast time here, and I'm going to check my notes just to make sure that we're absolutely on point here. 10 minutes, 13 seconds. As always, roasted on a 15 kilo loring. First crack happens at about 9:12, which gives us a time after crack of 1 minute and 1 second. For those of you that want to know, and I know some wants to, it's 10% development. Actually doesn't matter, but that's a number for you guys to work with. The end temperature here is 209.1, which is about, I'd say 0.75 degrees Celsius warmer than what we're usually doing. We're going to see where that comes out in terms of color. But basically what we find when you're working with Rwandan coffee, brewing the coffee, you have these kind of herbal qualities. It just doesn't benefit to push them as light as we would do, for example, in Ethiopian coffee. It just gets too greenish and we don't like that in the coffee. So therefore we pick up the end temperature just a tiny bit to kind of shade that off and go more into tropical and less herbal, if that makes sense. Brewing wise, which is always a really interesting part here. As you guys already know, we're about to launch the April Brewer. That's going to take a few more months, so therefore we're experimenting with other brew methods. For this month, we're actually playing around a lot with the V60. We're doing a new kind of recipe, or an extension of a recipe we've done on here before, which is basically 20 grams of coffee with 300 grams of water on a comandante grinder, which I know a lot of you guys are using. We're gonna argue that's about a 34 to 35 click on a standard comandante. Grinding coarse makes coffee taste better. 3 very simple pours. You start with 100 gram. You're gonna push that in 10 seconds. The first part of the pour, meaning the 50 grams, are in a circle, and the last 50 grams in one continuous pour is in the center. Circle just to make sure that all of that coffee gets saturated. Center to kind of speed up the extraction, meaning the flow rate, how fast the water goes through the coffee, makes the flavors a bit more vibrant, a bit more clear. You're gonna let all of that go down. After 50 seconds, you do the second pour. That's gonna be another 100 gram pour. Then you wait until basically 1 minute 50, and then you make the third pour, and you're gonna have a total brew time of about 220, 240, depending on grinder and so on, right? As with always, when it comes to our coffees, just give them a bit of time, right? Don't stress it. You don't have to have the coffee delivered within 2 days, because we don't want you to brew it until 14 days after roast, right? So when it comes, give it 1 or 2 days at home, at your kitchen counter, let it rest, and then start brewing it, right? For those of you that get the espresso coffee this year, we have the same coffee this month, as we always do basically, right? We've been actually pulling some shots of espresso today, and we've been basically overdosing the basket with about 2 grams. We're pushing about a 2.5 ratio out in around 20 seconds. And that comes out super crispy, really berry-like, very, very clean all the way, which is what we're looking for. So overall, super interesting coffee. We're happy to finally introduce some new African coffees. We're happy to kind of revisit Rwanda. Some of you that have been buying coffees from us before might be missing Mathiaso, which is the coffee we traditionally have been carrying here at April. The issue there is that the quality has basically declined a tiny bit every single year. Plus, we were confirmed that we're not going to be able to get the transparency in terms of where the lots come from that we're looking for, so we simply stopped buying from them. So therefore, we're super excited to start a collaboration with Emmanuel, the Coffee Bugoi, and we kind of see where we're taking from there, right? But what's interesting here is that we have full traceability. We know where it comes from, we know how it's farmed, and we're able to have an open conversation with the producer of this coffee to make it better. That's going to help our roasting, and it's going to help our brewing. It's going to make everything better. So as usual, if you guys have any questions, any thoughts, please just write them down here. We're always really happy that you guys are subscribing, and have a good day.